Hi everyone, welcome to episode 62 of the XS Noize Podcast. I'm Mark Millar. Thanks for listening. In this episode, I talk to legendary guitarist, songwriter and producer Bernard Butler about the new box set release of his debut solo album, People Move On. If you missed last week's episode, I spoke with acclaimed songwriter and former Manson frontman Paul Draper. We talked about his new album, Cult Leader Tactics. So check it out, and if you like the podcast, it would be amazing if you can subscribe and share it with your friends. If you want up-to-date music news, album reviews and interviews, then check out our main website at xsnoize.com. You can also follow us on Twitter, Facebook and Instagram. Search for the tag at XS Noize Music. On 20th of January, Demon Music Group will release a box set of Bernard Butler's debut solo album, People Move On, which includes a newly revocaled 2021 version of the entire album. On its initial release, People Move On reached number 11 in the UK album chart and received rave reviews. I caught up with Bernard to talk about making the album and much more. So sit back, relax and enjoy the XS Noize Podcast with Bernard Butler. So hi Bernard, welcome to the XS Noize Podcast.
Hi, how are you doing?
Very good. So let's get the lockdown thing out of the way first. So how have you dealt with the whole lockdown situation in the past few years?
Well, for me, the way I work, it hasn't really affected me because as a musician, I'm really happy locked away in a room. So it didn't really affect me as a recording musician. It would have affected me about now because I've just started to play live again and I really want to play live again. So for all those poor people who have been trying to play live and trying to promote records, and where it's their income, I feel they're very hardly done by. And I'm not talking about the Taylor Swifts of the world and the big rock bands and stuff like that. Of course, it affects everybody with those big acts, and particularly with those big acts, it affects the sort of sub-circus around them. So the crews, the caterers, the people driving trucks, all the skilled workers, lighting, sound engineers, all of that stuff. They're the people I really feel for in the big tours. I think the thing that's been really forgotten about is this grey area between young developing artists and the big artists, and you get a whole wad of musicians of all genres, classical, jazz, people who just make their living out of being a tribute band or something like that, which you may or may not be the thing that you want to watch, but that is their living, their bread and butter. They might be in their 50s, might be my age or 40s or 50s, middle-aged people, and they, I think, have been really harshly treated because for them, they have a very average living, but a living, and a skill that have been developed over the years. So I really feel for those people, actually, in the live circuit, because I think they have been left behind. As a recording musician, I've done an awful lot, if I'm honest, and so I've used the time pretty well. I've written an album, which I'm just recording at the moment, which is my own record, and I've written and recorded a record with somebody else, which is going to come out in a couple of months' time as well. And so I actually did quite a lot at home. So I can't really complain about it. I like being sort of locked away in a room and I work from home as well. That's the other thing. And I work almost exclusively on my own. I record everything on my own. I record in my house. So, the only side of it is when I step outside of my room here and because I've got a busy family and, so it's like a ridiculous hotel here, just of people, mountains of food passing through and stuff like that and people all the time. But yeah, I can't complain at all about this situation. I sort of feel for other people. I feel for my kids. I've got kids, they call them kids, but they're young people. And I really feel for their lives and how they're affected.
You're hailed as one of Britain's most original and influential guitarists. How do you feel about that?
I don't feel anything about it, actually. People say these things and it's really nice. Listen, I mean, if it's something that's, I suppose when you're young, if someone says that to you, you're either blown away by it or you kind of get very carried away by it. And neither of those things are very useful. At the point I am now, I've been making records for 30 years. So if somebody has something nice to say about that, you're just sort of relieved, really, that it's been worth anything, that's, and so if it's meant something to somebody else, I mean, that particular tag that people use of me, I can live with that, because what I like and what I look for in other people, and I look for in musicians I work with, and I look for in my own work, is character and personality. It's the number one thing that I always encourage with other people, with young musicians, to search for character over technique. Look for personality. Look for that unique DNA that every human being has. And it's most often found in the voice, of course, because that's something that physically you can't replicate. So in terms of guitar playing and musicianship, if I've used my character, you have to be brave, I guess, to get to a stage as a musician where you express yourself. Every musician tries to be someone else. We'll learn by reading music and by copying tunes, learning songs, and taking that step where you become yourself and allow yourself to be at the forefront. Like a blueprint of what you do is what you look for, I guess. So if I've managed to do that, or if I'm known in that way, then it's that's kind of what I'd like to be doing.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. When you first picked up the guitar, who were you looking at? What guitarists, were influencing you?
Well, I mean, I grew up in the 80s, that long ago. And so actually I was really blessed with the people I grew up with, because I wasn't, at that point, vintage rock and roll wasn't really a cool thing. It wasn't cool to be into sort of old bands. It wasn't cool to be into Led Zeppelin or, I don't know, the Beatles or anything like that, really. Everyone listened. When I grew up, we were listening to the music that was out at the time. And that was it. And I was really blessed at the role models I had. So they were specifically the Smiths, the New Order, the Cocteau Twins, Orange Juice, the Factory and Postcard bands. So and there's amazing people there. So specifically Johnny Marr was a huge influence, but equally Bernard Sumner's guitar playing was very much equal between the two of them. One technically, if you like, and one for personality again. And Roddy Frame, I adored, a pure technique, a virtuoso. Somebody who doesn't get mentioned a lot these days is Will Sargent from Echo and the Bunnymen, and Robin Guthrie, Edwin Collins. You go on and on. They're just fantastic guitar players everywhere. And The Edge, U2, they go in and out of whether you think it's cool or not. But I think the guy was fantastic in what he achieved. Records everywhere just had fantastic, characterful guitar playing. That didn't really, for me, hark back to the past particularly. I know those guys obviously had their influences, but it felt to me like it was very modern and it was very of my time. And it spoke to me. So, and as it used the guitar as a tool to speak the song, which was and to make a record. And so that was what was really important to me about it. It wasn't an era when you really looked to virtuoso soloing and blues riffing and stuff like that. All these people were very in the post-punk era, where they'd been inspired to do something original, but learned to do it well, I think.
Is the guitar always your instrument of choice when writing songs?
No, not at all, actually. I mean, piano is much more, about 50-50, I'd say. I mean, it really depends on who I'm with and what I'm doing. So it's not really the tool of choice is always the words anyway, and always about songs. And that's the first thing I go to. And through different phases of my life, I've been the guitar player or the music person or a bit of both or solely one or solely the other. So you always have to judge each situation and work out what your role is or the appropriate role with as a collaborator, because I've been a collaborator most of my career and a really happy one. I really love being with people and love finding out about people through their music, and I like being able to translate that very quickly into a relationship, a musical relationship. That's always something that fascinates me. So I've been really blessed with that.
You're about to release a four CD box set of your debut album, People Move On, which was originally released in 1998. You'd been in Suede, you'd been in McAlmont and Butler. So what was the catalyst that made you decide to record a solo album?
Well, the catalyst was that from being in Suede and leaving Suede, I was signed to Sony, and they kept me on, if you like. You know, you're signed and you don't just disappear into the world. They said, well, you're still signed to us, and we'd like you to make some records. And I was contracted to make solo records with them, which is something that I never thought about. And it wasn't something that I considered at all when I was in Suede or leaving Suede. Right? It was nothing to do with it. So I just found myself in a situation where increasingly I was getting a bit of pressure to like, well, what are you going to do? And it was just suggested. And I just started looking at the songs I was writing, and I started leaning more towards writing lyrics and writing songs on my own rather than collaborating at that time. And I gave it a go. It's as simple as that. That's how I ended up doing it. People were very kind to me, and people were giving me opportunities and putting trust in me and what they saw in me, a belief. And so, and I was really young. And life was a little bit of a whirlwind, and I just gave it a shot at the time, and I found myself in the studio. It just, the whole thing really snowballed really quickly, which is the good and the bad of it.
Mm-hmm. But how did you find that? I mean, it was, as you said, it was the first time you were writing the music, you were writing the lyrics, and it was the first time you were singing. Yeah. So were you nervous about that?
Yeah. I was very nervous about it, and I never really got over that at that time. When you meet anybody who is a vocalist, they tend to have been doing it for years, even if it's at school or in crappy bands or just in bad rehearsal rooms or whatever. That had been there. You'd learn to develop a delivery of a voice. So not just singing some words with a melody, but delivering it with a certain character, with a tone, with an attitude, with a personality again. And I hadn't done any of that. I hadn't done any of it. I'd just written some songs and mumbled them and put musical sort of arrangements together, and then went and sang on them. And so I was never, because of that, I was never entirely confident of it. I just thought, well, I'm kind of getting away with this. And people are letting me do it. It can't be awful if people are, letting me do it. So, and I just thought over time it was something that develops. I just thought if I can get my first foot on the first rung of the ladder, then I can develop it. And it worked to some extent, and it didn't work in some cases, but no, the answer is I wasn't entirely confident of it. No. And I think that when I went out to play live, I was very nervous of that fact and very inexperienced with holding, the whole thing together on my own. And so I would be hugely critical of myself in that respect then, but it's okay. That's kind of why I'm here now, because, I didn't want to, I suppose for a year, it didn't snowball in the way I wanted it to. Things went wrong after I made the second record, or around the time I was making the second record, when it should have been just coming into place. And things started falling apart with the record label and the people around me. And I just had to sort of run and get away from it for years and sort of forget about it. That's the honest truth.
I suppose you're well known for, being, very animated on stage, playing guitar. So how did you find that, playing the guitar in the way you do and having to sing and try and stay in key or whatever?
Well, I mean, we are talking about 23 years ago. So I wouldn't like to say that that's what I've done at any point in the last 20 years, really. It's just that, yes, when I was very young, I was a bit of a live wire for sure on stage. And I know I was known in that way visually. And so, yeah, all of those things became a problem. Yeah, it was difficult. It was difficult to manage. And it's just, I guess you're thinking all the time, what do people want? What do people expect me to do? And inevitably you're chasing after what people's expectations are when from the first moment they experienced you. So if you're the first time you meet somebody, they are they are driving, they are emptying the bins outside your house, then it would surprise you if a year later you saw them walking down the road in a policeman's uniform. That's, and you'd be like, well, why are you doing that? Well, the man in the policeman would probably say to you, well, I'm a policeman now. And you'd be saying, well what? I don't get it. Because you're the guy that does the bins. And you'd be like, well, is it not okay for me in the period of emptying the bins to learn another skill and become something different? Of course it is. But the way our minds were, we always want to plant ourselves in the first moment we saw somebody and the first moment we liked somebody, and again, it can go on and on like that. And I understand that because I'm as guilty of it as anybody. But I think when I was younger, I wasn't able to sort of translate all of that myself and work it all out. So yeah, it was difficult. Yeah, I admit that. I feel my whole sort of trajectory as a musician has been about trying to move one step forward all of the time and not really care about these things. And I think I've always thought that if I do enough moving and stepping, eventually it will make sense as a whole picture. And if you pin things together, and I think at this point, as I said, after 30 years, I feel entitled a little bit to point that out, to be okay with it all. That I've been with a million different situations.
On the album, the late great vocalist Denise Johnson signed backing vocals on 4 of the album songs: Woman I Know, People Move On, Autograph, and the first single, Stay. Yeah. What was it like working with Denise, and did she offer any singing tips?
No, she didn't. She was wonderful. She was brilliant. She was very, very alive character, big personality in every way. She just came down to the studio, came down from Manchester for one day. I think it's like an afternoon or something. She came down and she was just full of beans and full of life always, Denise. No, she just came, I was just sort of blown away that she wanted to do it. I mean, I knew her voice from obviously Screamadelica and also the electronic records, which I loved. And because she was known to creation because of Primal Scream, etc. It was just I suggested it and someone said, oh, we know Denise, we'll get her to do it. And there she was. And I couldn't believe she turned up. No, she gave me no vocal tips. She gave me every impression that she just loved the music and she was into doing it. I just kept throwing things at her saying, I'd like this to happen here, or could you do something here? We did some kind of very gospely kind of backing vocals on People Move On, which I really love. And there's a song called Autograph, where she sings these sort of quite psychedelic stuff. It goes right at the very end of the song, right when it's ending. You can hear her sort of just ad-libbing all this stuff, and we put it through effects and stuff. She was just game for it and up for it, and we just had a brilliant laugh. But no, she was never so patronising as to think that she could sing and I couldn't. Of course she could. It's true. But no, she's greatly missed. She was lovely, and I've met her a few more times down the years. I know lots of people who are good friends of her in Manchester. It's very, very sad about that, but and I'm very grateful to have. It's a really lovely thing when you have, for me, in some respects, that you have somebody's gone, and then you discover them through something musical that you've done. It almost feels like they're living a little bit within the music. I hate to be cod spiritual about stuff, but when you hear someone's voice back and they're gone, there is something really beautiful about that. I'm blessed to have been part of that picture.
You also self-produced the album. Did Creation attempt to get anyone else in to produce, or were they happy you doing it?
They didn't. No.
No.
No, they didn't. I mean, they just let me do what I wanted, and in some ways, we should have got somebody. I think I was probably terrified of being in front of somebody in it and just not being good enough or something, or somebody not pushing me as hard as I was going to push myself. I don't know. There was, we started it off with Mike Hedges. I did the demos with originally, and then I moved on from Mike, and Yeah, I just ended up doing it and started doing it, and I had good engineers. I was really blessed with great engineers, Nick Wallage and George Schilling. George Schilling finished it off. So it was sort of fine, really. Yeah, I mean, I can tell you now, I could list all the things that as a producer, I would now look at it and say, this is what I would do to this record. But, I'm not there anymore.
Well, most of the tracks are over 4 minutes long, apart from A Change of Heart and Not Alone. Was there ever any pressure from the label to edit any of the tracks down? Or did they just leave you to your own devices?
The one thing that was suggested by somebody, I remember somebody in the marketing department wanted the track listing to be different. They wanted the singles to be closer to the front. And that was a good idea. And I said no. because I was young and I was an idiot. I wanted to do exactly what I wanted, and I'm kind of glad I stuck to my guns. But at the same time, thinking about it, yeah, that was a good idea. Yeah. I mean, if I look at it now, it could be 3 songs shorter for sure, and edits and stuff. Well, on the new version, I have actually edited the beginning of A Change of Heart. I've cut off the intro because I just found it boring, and I got rid of it. You know what? It's a really interesting way that people look at pop music. Pop music is 3.5. Most pop records are 3 minutes long because that's the physical length you can fit onto a piece of vinyl at 78 RPM, and that's why popular music became 3 minutes. Because that's the only reason why we moved from classical music and jazz and decided that pop music has to be a certain length. That's something that always confounds me a little bit, because obviously with CDs and every format, I never look at clocks. I don't care about it at all. I think about what makes a beautiful piece of music, and I've always thought about it like that. So the cliche is that if you're looking beyond 3 minutes, it becomes self-indulgent and proggy and stuff like that. I don't think about it like that. I think about the music I listen to, and I listen to Spirit of Eden. I don't count the minutes on that record. When I listen to all the last few months, Floating Points with Pharoah Sanders, which is the most beautiful record last year, which has got, I think it's 9 songs, which are all in the same key and pretty much the same movement. And they're all 6, 7, 8 minutes long. I just listen to music. I don't count it all. I don't care.
The opening track, Woman I Know, it's an amazing way to start the album. And I think it's about 8 minutes long. It's just so epic.
Yeah, I just begin it, and when it feels like it's right, complete the piece of music. I just never get this idea that we should be kept, that it's a criticism when some of the greatest piece of music, it's such a naive way of criticizing music to say, if it's over 3 minutes, it's boring, or it means you're being self-indulgent. I find that such an unambitious way of looking at being creative. I think by virtue of having to doing something creative, you should always be looking to break every single rule and challenge everything. That's my point. People
Move On received really good reviews from critics, and out of the 3 singles released, Stay was the big hit, reaching number 12 on the UK chart. How did that feel once it was out there and you were getting it had such an impact that way?
I liked it. I really, really enjoyed it. I thought it was received well and it sold really well, and I was really relieved by it, to be honest. I just wanted to get out and play it, and I think immediately I'd done it, I was already felt shot of it. I felt it was quite an exhausting record. There is a lot of music on there. I did do a lot of recording on it, spent quite a lot of time. It's quite emotionally drawn out lots of pieces of music on it. I was pretty exhausted the whole process, and inevitably when you make records, and they tend to take 6 months for them to come out. By the time that 6 months has passed, you're already in another place. And I was already really, really wanted to move on by the time it came out, and really, really happy to. But then you start a year-long process of promoting the thing that you'd spent 6 months getting away from. But I was really delighted. I was just really relieved, really, to be making music. I mean, at that point, it was a real sort of, I don't feel like that anymore. It felt like a real pivotal moment. Like am I going to get away with this? I think the point of making music of that is the 90s and who I was, where I'd come from, you know, the hoo-ha of being in Suede and not being in Suede and all that kind of stuff meant that you expected to be a commercial entity. And that was quite a difficult thing to get my head around because I'd never started anything to be like that. I'd never been in Suede to be like that. It was never intended in that way. I never thought that I'd ever make a living out making music. I didn't expect to, but I really hoped that I'd get the chance to make music. And so at that point, I guess you're at a point in your life, you're sort of mid to late 20s, and you're thinking, what point am I going to have to get a job? You know, at what point does this falls apart? You know, what am I going to do then? I don't feel like that at the moment so much. And, but yeah, I definitely felt like that. And so it's nice that it was successful. But it was all about what happened next.
So all these years later, you've decided to revisit the album. So why did you decide, right, it's now the time to look back on this album and, you know, reissue it?
So inevitably, although it's a looking back process, that it's begun by doing the opposite and looking forward, which is that I began to spend some time trying to perform songs from my career, from any point in my career, on my own without listening to them. So it was just a bit of an experiment where every Wednesday afternoon I'd spend in a rehearsal room on my own and just with a guitar, and I'd just try and stand there and think, okay, can I remember any songs that I've written? Simple as that. Or anything really, anything that I'd liked, anything that I'd been involved with, produced or anything. And I spent a lot of time, I just did this for about 6 months on and off. And my mindset was about, or the kind of concept of it was to not write down words or not to look up words or not to listen to the records, but to try and do it by memory, by which you assemble a sort of a selected view of your memory as you are at the point you are in your life, rather than the memory of exactly where you were, because I felt that was really true to the idea of having the passage of time between the two places. So that also gave a beautiful creative freedom where if I forgot words, I could change them. If I didn't know what the key was, I could think, well, this one sounds good. If I forgot what the chords were, I just made up the chords on the spot. And I could get rid of the 7-minute outros to songs that everyone hated, or the boring intros with the strings on, and just begin the song. So just reinvent things. And inevitably, as part of this process, I started to also started practicing songs that I was writing on my own at the time. I found myself developing a different voice and recording myself I was just recording on my phone in this rehearsal room and bringing it home and thinking, well, this is quite nice. I wanted to find a thread, you know. I'm very well aware that people will often go to Suede, Bernard Butler, and then here, and that's it, without forgetting that from the 30 years, there's literally hundreds of artists in between. So for me, Suede and Bernard Butler are very important people in my discography, but unfortunately, they hold absolutely equal measure with all the other people that I've worked with that you may know or not know or care about or like or any of those things, just because that's the way it's gone. It's like, I'm not going to say 1 year of my life is more important than another, or one day or one person, you know. So I put these things together and I try to find a thread between all of these things to see what is it? Why am I doing this? It's like, why me? What's the point of me being here? What have I achieved? You know, I mean, it's a midlife crisis thing. Like, what is this? What is the point of doing all this stuff? You know? So I tried doing this, singing it, and I found by recording myself that I liked the way I was singing now as a 50-year-old man. And, it had a personality and a character that was different, felt more natural. Nobody cared. There was no Creation Records weren't waiting at the door to hear what I was doing. Nobody wanted to hear it. You weren't waiting to ask me questions about it. Nobody heard it. My wife didn't hear it. Literally nobody knew what I was doing, and nobody heard it. And I didn't play it to anybody and didn't tell anybody about it at all. So you see, it was absolutely the most pure bass level. Even in I chose a rehearsal room where nobody was there. Every Wednesday, I was the only person in the whole building. And I did this completely deliberately so that it's the most pure setting. One guitar, where's the thread between all these songs? So what this took me to is two things. First of all, writing and being comfortable with the new songs, and made me go into a fury of finishing songs and being inspired. And secondly, it made me come away with versions of older songs, like the songs on People Move On, which I felt just sounded better. I just thought my voice, I just sing these songs better. And you know what? The thing I thought about it is, well, I went from not wanting to listen to this record for 20 years because I couldn't bear to listen to it, to thinking, actually, you know what? There's some quite good songs here, and I like some of it. I don't like all of it, but I like a lot of the words I really love. I can understand where I was at the time, and by delivering them now in a particular way, I feel they carry a different levity to the words than they did at the time, and that has a sort of an integrity and a value to it, which I really like. So that's the long story of it. Mm-hmm. And at the same time, Demon were hassling me to do a reissue. And I just said, okay, lads, I've got an idea. If I'll do a reissue for you, if you let me re-sing the whole thing. And they said, okay. And so here we are. There's a long story for it.
Yeah, I love listening to both albums, like one after the other. Your vocals are completely different, but it works really, really well. Did you change or add any instrumentation on the backing tracks at all?
No, I mean, so backing tracks, where they come from is when you mix an album, you'll be you'll run off the real mix, the song that goes off to be mastered, but then you'll run off the instrumental. So you'll just mute the vocals. And generally when this happens, you might, do a few silly things to the mix because there's no vocal, and you might turn a guitar up or down or something. But also what might happen is that you may well, after the event, go back and do another mix of the finished master, but you'll never go back and do the instrumental. So it meant the instrumental backing tracks were they are different to the original album. There's no doubt about that. So there's various things. Sometimes they're better and sometimes not as good, but you win and lose on different ones. But that was all that was there. So I like the fact they're a bit different. A couple of the songs I've added a bit of guitar to, because literally when I was sitting here singing along, I was just had a guitar in my hand and I was just messing about and thinking, oh, well, why didn't I do that? So People Move On has a little acoustic solo on it, which I really like. And there's a song called In Vain, which I always really loved. And that has a slide guitar solo on it, I think. Is it a slide? Not sure. It's got another little solo in it anyway. At the time on In Vain, I'd put a melodica solo on it, thinking I was being really clever to not put a guitar solo on it, and in this little instrumental passage, which is really nice. But I just put some guitar on it. It sounds nice.
The reissue comes with B-sides and demos as well. Did you make any pleasant musical discoveries you'd forgotten about when going through the tapes and putting the reissue together?
Well, I mean, songs that I really couldn't remember at all. There's a song called The Sea, which I really like, and I really don't like the vocal on it, but I really love the recording of it, and I really enjoyed singing that again. I really enjoyed the words. I just thought the words were good, and I just thought this is a good song, and so I felt I was doing it more justice. There's some what's the other ones? There's a song called My Domain, which I always loved, and so I was really glad to redo that one as well. Yeah, I just really enjoyed reimagining them. As you say, if you want to listen to it back to back, you can. And I'm not at all asking people to delete one or the other or prefer one or the other. I know which one I'll always listen to now. But, you've got to understand that it's not a matter of being better or worse. The experiment is that one was made when I was 27 years old and had never sung before, and one was made by a 50-year-old man. And I think I just think that's quite interesting, the way you can deliver words in a completely different way, because, 23 years has passed, through my veins and my bones, and that changes you, changes all of us. So that's how it affects the way you deliver things.
I read somewhere that you'd considered naming the album Girls, Girls, Girls instead of People Move On. Is that true?
Yeah, that was true. It was a joke. It was kind of a joke thing at the time to put on when I sent the first copy of it, and I just put that on it to see what it was a joke. It was. I think they took it. Everybody took everything very seriously in the 90s. I think that was taken completely seriously. Yeah, they were imagining the sleeve, I imagine.
A bit like Electric Ladyland or something like that.
Yeah, something like that. With me in the middle. I can't believe I didn't do that. What an amazing sleeve. Me just sitting in the middle of that.
Well, there's also always the next album, Bernard.
There is. I'm not sure my wife will allow that to happen.
Do you feel satisfied that you were able to go back and change the album? Overall, was it an enjoyable experience revisiting the album?
It was very enjoyable. It was very satisfying. I'm very grateful for the chance to do it, mostly because it's, I could say it's because I've set the record straight or something corny like that, but it's not that. It's really just because it's set me on a roll to record more music and to write again. And that's the most important thing for me. It's always the most important thing. It's really hard to hammer home that as a musician, because we all want to listen to what we love and what we love from before. But when you're on the creative end of it, that's kind of the worst case scenario for me. I can't get up in the morning to think I put on one of my own records to make myself feel good. I have to put on something new. The minute I go into the shower, I need to go and listen to something that I've done yesterday and know that I'll listen to something and I'll hear something I need to change or need to improve, and I can go straight to my studio and work on it. Mm-hmm. That's what I did this morning. That's what I do every day of my life. And I have done since whenever. So, but again, going back to Suede days, that's what I did then when nobody cared and nobody's interested in that. That was the obsession, to go and do the next thing. It was, and always on and on and on. And it's always been like that for me. And so that's the fact that that's given me being in this process has enhanced that for me. I know it sounds like it's looking back. It's a strange thing to say, but it's all it's made me do is want to write. And in a way, it's, I've really enjoyed, I played some shows recently and I'm going to play more shows. It's got me back to performing, and it's got me back to, I really enjoy performing these songs now, and really enjoyed reinventing them and not feeling precious about them. Again, going back to 1998, when I was performing them, I felt like I had to play it just like the record, or had to do something, make sure it all looked right and it was all perfect. And you get to a point now where I don't really care about any of those things. I can get on a stage and perform without a set list and just perform in any key and be completely free about how I perform things. And with that, I enjoy performing these songs. I enjoy performing these songs and performing new songs alongside them.
It'll be great to see you coming to Ireland, hopefully, this year to hear you play the songs.
I'd like that. I played some, I think it's the Black Box in Belfast. Is it the Black Box? In the Cathedral Quarter. And I did that a couple of years ago with my friend Colin from the Mull Historical Society. We did the festival. There's the festival. Was it the Cathedral Arts Festival? Yeah. And we did the Black Box. It was a lovely place and had a great night there. Yeah, and I'd love to come to Belfast and play. And I really want to do all these things. I think for years I just didn't perform. I was working so much as a producer and a writer, and working like in a room like this. And you fit, and people would always say to me, what do you do now? You still making music? And I'm like, I've made 4 albums this year, you know, and I did that for years, like 15 years. People would say that to me, like, if you're retired, you know, what do you do now? Or people say to me all the time, I'm going to see you tonight. And I said, where? What, in the pub or where are you going to see me? At Arsenal, you know? And they'd say, no, I'm going to see you at, you know, Brixton Academy or something. And I said, why? What do you mean? It said, well, you're playing. And I said, no, I'm not. And I'm going to be at Arsenal. People say it all the time, say it to my wife, you know, because they think I'm in Suede, basically. And they say, people who my wife meets, you know, she knows really well, will just say, oh, we're going to see Bernard tonight. And she's like, no, you're not. And she said, no, we are. We absolutely are. And she said, no, I can absolutely tell you, you're not. He's going to be with me. What are you talking about? And she said, no, I've got, and they literally don't believe her. They literally will not take no. People have even come up to me in the street the day after a Suede concert and said, thought the gig was great last night. Well done. And I just say, cheers.
That's amazing. I mean, anybody who knows anything about Suede should know that you only did 2 albums with them.
Well, people want to know what they want to say. But the point being that I realised for many years, people either thought I was in Suede still or retired. And it's quite frustrating with the amount of music I made. So, and I feel like if you're not on a stage in front of people, if you're not on a platform, then you kind of don't exist. And I understand that now. and so I'd like to put that right in the future. And I really enjoy playing. I enjoy playing these songs, and I enjoy the way people come to see me and understand a little bit about the story of everything I've done. I feel like if people have made the effort to come out and see me, then they know a little bit more about what I've been doing for 30 years. And I'm really grateful for that. So yeah, I would very much like to. I'm not sure when at the moment, but I'm going to try and make it happen.
Do you think you'll ever return to the second solo album, Friends and Lovers, for a reissue?
I don't think so. I mean, these things take so long. I can't tell you how much effort it is. It looks like, I know some people do just stick out a new version, but I don't really like doing that, and I've never wanted to do that, and it just takes a lot of effort to do it. Friends and Lovers, I like some of it. Some of it I really, really don't like. I like the songs in it which I just would want to put in the bin tomorrow. And there's a couple of songs in it which I really love, actually. So I don't know if I can get round to it, to be honest. And also that was a kind of a bleak time. When that happened, it came out, literally the day it came out, the label folded. There's nothing worse that can happen to a record. It was awful, and it was awful personally around that time. And I had to promote it, and it just felt like everything felt like such a dreadful disappointment. So no is the answer. No, never say never, but I've got no plans to at the moment. You know, I wouldn't want to re-sing that one either because it just sounds all right for it. You know, it doesn't bother me.
I have to ask you about Yes. It's one of the best songs of the 90s, in my opinion. It's such a positive, uplifting song. You know, what can you tell me about writing that song?
Well, I can remember specifically where I was when I was writing it as a piece of music. I remember it being just a really sunny day, and I used to live in Highgate in North London, really lovely part of North London, and we had a basement flat. I remember having this little room and wanting to write something with strings and a drum beat. I just put this drum beat together on a drum machine and written these string parts. There's lots of things that inspired it musically that, God, I don't know, there's so many things that probably I can't remember now. But I wanted to make something really uplifting. I wanted it to be unusual. It had all these key changes in it. That was the point. I wanted something that rose and rose musically, but didn't give you the feeling that you couldn't follow it musically. So it has several key changes in it all the way through it. And when I met David McCalmont, I mean, it was kicking around as a piece of music for a long time, that track. And it was pretty much identical to how it's turned out, with no vocal on it. And when I got introduced to David McCalmont and went to see him sing, and he was playing at a place called the Jazz Cafe in Camden in London. and he had a drummer with him, a Japanese guy called Mako, and I saw the two of them together. And the jazz cafe's quite got a big ceiling, and Mako was really loud that night. And all I remember is just being this drummer that was just so loud, and it just being this cavernous drum sound, and David singing. And I just thought, well, that's my song, that's my sound. And so I met David afterwards, and I had a tape with me of this piece of music, and I met David, and I said, here, do you want this? And so he came round. He came round to see me like 2 days later, and we kind of put it together really quickly. He had like an idea and most of the words, and and he was singing Yes, and we said, let's call it Yes. It was just very quick and very, very easy to do. But basically the what was important is I really wanted his drummer, Mako. That was really important to me.
Yeah, the drum sounds on that song are amazing as well.
Yeah. And it was just, the whole thing was that it was very idealistic, that it was about a very singular, pure pop moment, that it wasn't about being, obviously I'd just left Suede at that point, and I'd been part of a group. When you're in a group, you're part of a sort of a company, like a part of a business, and everything around you is devoted to it. And you feel like you're working for the company all of the time. And it's very hard to get away from that. And I wanted to do something musically that had that obviously anything like that where you were joined together, it means that there is a limitation. And so if you can see a limitation, you need to push it away. That's your job as a creative person. You have to look for the walls and try and push them away. And so the wall there was to say, well, how can I do something that doesn't resolve around a T-shirt, selling merchandise, doing tours. It doesn't have to revolve around how many members are in the band. I wanted to make a sound, and a one-off beautiful sound. I didn't want it to have a sleeve or a logo. At one point, it wasn't even going to have a name. We weren't going to call it anything. That's why it became Bernard Butler, because it was just like we had to put something on the sleeve, but I didn't want to call it anything at all. And I just wanted to, it was going to be in a disco sleeve, with just a label on, no label on it. I didn't get away with all those things, but that was the original idea. Just like a 60s sort of pop record you'd found in a charity shop with no label on it, or something that you put on and you didn't know who it was, and it just was like the most glorious noise. So yeah. That's what it was, and I got lucky with David because he could sing anything. He was young and he was prepared to just say whatever. Let's just do it. He was a bit what's the word? He was just very open to trying anything, and very easily suggested by me, which was a bonus. He went with me. He gave me trust, and that's an amazing thing. So it was a beautiful moment. It's my favourite moment in that respect, because the way people just sort of hang on to it, not because they saw us live or because they wanted to look like us or because they bought the T-shirt or we were their favourite band. It was just because this electrical noise comes out of a speaker and makes you feel good. And that's all I wanted. That's all I ever want to achieve in life. If you can do that once for somebody, I think that's a really nice thing to do. So that's why I always loved that song.
And it still stands up today. It just gets you moving. The first time I heard it just stopped me in the tracks and I went, like, what's that? And it was even better when I found out you wrote it. So.
People still talk to me about it in the same way, and that's why it's that's why I like it as much. Yeah.
And wasn't there a brief period after that there where you nearly joined the Verve?
Yeah, there was it was about 2 or 3 weeks, I think. And but I did hang out with them quite a lot, and we did some rehearsing together for a few days. And just jammed really, and they had all those songs that became urban hymns, at the time, and they were playing those at the time in the sort of bit of a disjointed fashion, but they sort of half recorded them as well, and then it all collapsed a little bit. So I think it's kind of, I don't. It was to do with the guitar player Nick. Oh my God, I can't remember at the time, but and I think it was very disjointed about who was going to be in the band and who wasn't, and it was very. I was very unclear what was going on behind the scenes, or whether this guy was really in the band or not, or what was going on. I don't know. It was it was a very strange scenario at the time, but they were the 90s.
You've worked and produced and collaborated with some amazing artists. And recently I enjoyed the album In Memory of My Feelings with Catherine Ann Davies. Do you have a favourite album that you've worked or collaborated on?
The Old Well by Sam Lee. Yeah, that's my favourite record. Which I don't really play guitar on, so that's typical answer from me, really. It's I play guitar on a little bit of it. I do play guitar on a few songs, but I produced it, recorded it, mixed it, and it's a very, very unique record and special record. I think it's a beautiful sounding record. I think it's got an astonishing level of artistic creativity that went into it, the passion that went into creating the musical backings. The musicians were absolutely extraordinary, and the lyrical outlook of it, of what Sam does by using folk songs as an inspiration, his commitment to the environment and his commitment to blending the old with the new, and to using folk song as a modern technique, rather than sort of being something about Aaron jumpers and finger picking guitar and stuff. For me, it's completely extraordinary experience being part of it, watching amazing musicians put things together. It's everything that I always want to do. Just be in the room when the best people. And it didn't sell loads of copies. I don't know if anybody even knows it. If you haven't heard that record, that's my number one recommendation. For me, it blows away anything else I've done. Yeah, oh. When it came out, Robert Plant phoned me up.
Wow.
Get that? Robert Plant phoned me up and said, "Did you do that record?" I've just, and he said it, and he just ranted to me about how great, how much he loved it. People like that know. He knows. He's amazing. He's a lovely bloke, and he's got good taste. He knows his records. He doesn't need to phone me up to tell me about a good record unless he means it. Put it that way. So, that's my favourite record.
I don't know it, but I'm going to check it out straight after this.
It came out about 18 months ago, and it's got Elizabeth Fraser.
Wow.
Yeah, I mean, when we were just putting it together, doing the arrangements and rehearsing, and Sam was talking about Elizabeth Fraser singing on it, so that was a moment made in my life, and it's a beautiful, beautiful record.
Yeah, especially since you said the Cocteau Twins inspired you. Yeah, it must have been an amazing experience working with her.
Yeah.
Last few questions, just quick fire. I always like to ask my guests the following questions. Out of all the albums in your collection, who do you have the most albums by?
The most albums by?
Yeah.
Crikey. It's probably someone like Neil Young, just because he's made so many bloody records. It's not really, it's not necessarily because they're my favourite ones, but there's so many that at a certain point, it's probably Neil Young CDs, yeah. Probably closely followed by, Dylan or Miles Davis, but there's a lot of Miles Davis.
Which song or album is your guilty pleasure?
Well, nothing's guilty for me at all. I love everything. And if I like something, then it's something that I can talk about. So without any guilt at all. So I don't know. I mean, if you're talking about cheesy pop or something, what's regarded in that way? Well, I listen, what I listen to all day long in my kitchen? Magic FM is on in my kitchen. Because I need to know that by lunchtime I've heard Eternal Flame by the Bangles at least once in my day, or I can't get through my day, because I love that record. I love the Bangles. I love Susanna Hoffs, and I love that record. It's not a guilty pleasure for me. My favorite thing to just turn up that makes me feel good will always be "Give It Up" by Casey and the Sunshine Band.
Yeah,
I love that. That's my favorite. That'd be my favorite record ever, I think, because I love it. I love the arrangement and I love the lyric. It's so beautiful and so simple.
And what was your favorite album of 2021?
It would be The Weather Station, which I really love, or else it's between The Weather Station and Ignorance by The Weather Station, or else Floating Points and Pharoah Sanders, those two records, which those are the two that I played most all through the year. Yeah, fantastic record.
Must check those out.
Oh, The Weather Station is absolutely fantastic. She's brilliant. Lady from Canada. It's her third or fourth album, I think. Floating Points and Pharoah Sanders is a really mad one. It's really astonishing, beautiful record, very expansive. It's with the London Symphony Orchestra, and Pharoah Sanders plays over the top. It's absolutely beautiful. If you don't know that,
I'll definitely check them out. That's me, Bernard. I really enjoyed talking to you. It was an absolute pleasure.
Thank you very much. Thank you so much for having me.